Okay, this is Satina, and I am going to read this novel, or at least we're going to try. Jesus, a Novel, by Walter Wangerin Jr. And I'm here in a small room in a small house, and there's life going on all around me, so there may be sounds, there may be interruptions. This is not a professional book reading. This is me living my life reading this book to learn more about Jesus as a person, because God told me to. Okay, so we're going to start with the prologue, which I've already read like 3 times. So here we go with the 4th one. I am standing on the high south side of a rugged defile, a wadi which cuts a long descent through cliffstone to empty its waters into the Dead Sea, the Salt Sea. I am not so far from the sea that I cannot see its waters off to my right. There is a hard wind blowing from north to south down the gullet of the sea, causing armies of waves to roll and rise and break into whitecaps. They crash in triumph and defeat. It is late in the afternoon. I spent the morning among the Essene community, whose people sleep severally in caves and underground rooms and tents in this wilderness. But they gather in a large building to study and to write, and always they eat together, declaring their meals to represent and to celebrate the new world coming. I saw the tables at which they write, and the ink pots and the clay jars in which they keep their scrolls. I saw their wheels and kilns and the pottery these produced. They catch water from the wadi to keep in pools, to drink, to wash. They bathe often. They baptize unto the purity of their persons. I listened to their teachings, particularly their expectation of the end, when they shall be shown to be the true Israel, and false priests and power-mongers shall be dismissed and displaced. And then I came apart to this place, the south side of a falling gorge. I've stood for half the morning in my own frowning and hollow meditations. I think of nothing. I can consider no thing within my heart. My heart is empty, grieving me, causing me to breathe with something like a panic. But suddenly there, to my right, far off and down where the wadi meets the shore of the great salt sea, but flying this way between the walls of the gorge, ascending higher and higher along its floor and filling the defile with the sound of its own wind, the wind of her great wings beating, comes an eagle. I am standing at the very edge of her long approach. I watch her magnificent ascent, her bright adventing here, and my breathing grows deeper. She is coming straight toward me. I see the motion of her flight. She rows the wind. Her wings sweep forward and backward low, and her neck gives a little lunge with each rowing, and there is astonishing strength in her breast and shoulders, and her beak is hooked and terrible with danger. And then there is a moment when she is but 10 feet in front of me, passing me at my level exactly, and though she does not turn her head, her single eye, yellow, fixed, sharpened by a bony brow, sees me. The eagle looks at me. She does not stop flying by. Nevertheless, it seems to me that this moment lasts and lasts, and I cannot draw a breath. And in the eagle's eye is the sun and the sky and all creation, and God in the still black center, the pupil of the eagle's eye. And all are staring straight at me. I am no longer a secret on the face of the earth, a man sneaking from here to there whom no one notices. I am known. The earth and the heavens, they know me. In her eye I see that the eagle must even know my name, and by the gaping of her beak will shortly scream my name, and this terrifies me. For shall my name be screamed in judgment or in blessing? And what shall be my name when it resounds to the 4 corners of the world? But then I realize that the eagle has flown on, higher and higher off to my left, unto the horizon of the evening, into the dying sunlight, where she seems to burn like golden fire and turn to bronze. Book 1, The Son of God. Part 1, Mary. Chapter 1, The Room. Zechariah and his son John had preceded the rest of the families by 10 days to the city of Jerusalem. Indeed, all the able-bodied priests in Palestine, and all the Levites too, arrived in the holy city some few days ahead of the worshippers. They had to prepare themselves for their sacred service, and then to purify, the temple and its precincts for the remembrance of the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. More than 100,000 pilgrims would pour into a city whose normal population was 30,000. Jerusalem, swelling 4 times its size, required the services of all 24 divisions of priests and all the weekly courses of Levites, a workforce of 18,000 men. Zechariah's division was the 8th, that of Abiah, out of the hill country of Judea. It lay closer to Jerusalem than most of the others. Nevertheless, Zechariah left home a full week earlier than priests from regions more distant than his. He had reasons. He had purposes. But though the man was pious, truly, piety was not one of those purposes. Zechariah had grown most old. His eyes had hardened into a pearl white and staring blindness. The last time Mary had seen him, and this a year ago, she had suffered pity for those eyes, overhung by great bushes, wild and uncut. Pity, too, for his shoulders, bent at right angles to his spine, driving his face forever toward the ground. She had known him old and strong, the man now old and stooped. Travel was hard on him, even when he crouched upon his little donkey and was held in place by the hand of his son. For this reason Zechariah had left early with John, who was old enough to know the way, to lead the donkey, to find both food and drink for his father, to arrange places for rest every other hour in the day. The boy had turned 13 just 8 months ago. He had attained the age of a man. There was yet another reason for their early departure, more pragmatic than spiritual, more familial than personal. Zechariah wanted to secure a room in one of the houses owned by the temple. Not a house, just a single room. Despite his great and respectable age, the old priest was as ordinary as any other country son of Aaron. His only advantage would have to be in approaching the temple authorities first. On this year particularly, Zechariah desired his family to eat the Passover meal within the walls of the city of Jerusalem. His whole family, in a room large enough to accommodate 3 tables and 12 bodies. He was able to reserve the same room for 10 years straight, Mary said to her son as they walked among the pilgrims. 2 years ago he lost it. Last year, too, we ate in a strange place. Poor Zechariah. He knows we like familiarity. Then the women have no trouble finding the oven, the dishes, cloth, water, cushions. Mary walked in silence a while. Then, but I don't think that's the deepest reason he wants the same room again this year. Mary and her husband had discussed the matter of Zechariah's tremulous intensities, how absolute he had become regarding things of small significance. They sensed finality. Joseph and Mary both suspected that this would be the last year the old priest would serve at the Passover. Actually, the lack of sight was not his greatest handicap. Zechariah knew by heart every inch of the generous esplanade and every gesture of his office. But now his hands shook with an uncontrollable violence. He could scarcely hold the silver tray beneath the flow of the lamb's arterial blood. Last year Joseph had been forced to grab the priest's wrist so that any blood at all might be caught on the tray. Finalities, then. Joseph believed that Zechariah, unable and infirm, sought a little rest and a lot of sunlight in his shrinking years. He'll stay to home next. Man'll sit on his roof and smile. Mary, on the other hand, thought it likelier that Zechariah would not live to know another Passover. Not in Jerusalem, not in the hill country where he dwelt, not in this world. The silver cord will snap. So went the sentiment in the woman's mind, a mournful sort of music. The golden bowl will break, the pitcher crack upon the fountain, and the man that once could move with the strength of the sea will, under a withering sun, sink into himself like a dry well full of dust. Aloud, and more than once, she said to Joseph, "When he cannot go up to Jerusalem, he will not live at all." Joseph said, "I think he'll wait till his son turns priest, like himself, like Elizabeth's father." Mary said, "They waited nearly to death for the boy to be born in the first place, and when they received him, they received the assurance of descendants." Mary had been present at that birth. She had seen the transfiguration of the parents, stunned by such a birth in their old age. "For him, Joseph," she said, "for Zechariah, I think this is life enough, that a son has followed him into the world, not that a son must follow him into the service of priests." Children are children. The big man bit his sentences, making them short. But grandchildren are descendants. Yes, but Mary was often more than a step ahead of him. She had said, "for Zechariah," because she knew her husband's mind, that for him, for Joseph the carpenter, the development of one's son was all in all the purpose and the merit of a father's life. Young Yeshi, 12 years old, had conned his father's craft, stood skillfully in his father's tradition. The boy's deft use of a plane caused Joseph to nod with silent approval, thin shavings curling before the blade, olive wood smooth as basalt behind. But more than the craft, it was Yeshi's intellectual aptitudes that silenced the carpenter's mouth with pride. For at the age of 5 the child had suddenly begun to read the Aramaic words he saw everywhere in the big city of Sepphoris, and then at 7 he, with an ancient rabbi in their tiny synagogue, was reading the Hebrew of the Holy Scriptures, causing Joseph's eyes to water and his nose to run. And why shouldn't the father permit himself such tender internal delights? He and Nazareth and most of his kind couldn't read a word in any language. "He'll make his living as a carpenter," Joseph whispered in Mary's ear while they lay in bed together, "but he'll make his name as a scribe, in Jerusalem. I'll be there, old, crippled, content." A grand company of Galilean pilgrims had been climbing the hills of Judea for half a day toward Jerusalem for the Passover, when Mary and Joseph and the boy turned aside. They departed the jubilant music and the great river of Jews going up to Jerusalem. Leading the donkey that bore their loads, they went single file up a narrow stony path until they came to a little village as old as Moses. There they approached the house of Zechariah and Elizabeth. It was almost a week ago that young John had seen to the old man's travel. Now these would see to hers. She would ride. They would bear their possession on their own backs. "Elizabeth? Elizabeth, are you ready?" Everyone would arrive safely there, and they would celebrate the story again, and they would experience deliverance again, as if it had happened just yesterday. End of chapter 1. Just a few thoughts on this. It seems like Joseph, and possibly even Mary, in this story, don't realize that Yeshi, Jesus, has a bigger destiny. So in that case, it's a bit like my own life, which is really interesting because I always assumed from the Christmas story, the way it's told, the angel came to Mary and said she was going to bear the Son of God, I think. Maybe I have to relook at that. But anyway, it seems from the novel that his parents maybe don't know that he's going to be a little bit more than a carpenter and a scribe. So, yeah, I've realized that just like everything else that I experience, I am to make comments at the end of every chapter, because of course that's kind of the whole point, is to get the soul of Jesus' perspective on the story that is about him, about me, about my previous life. So that's about it. I hope it gets more exciting. I don't usually read fiction like this. I don't go in for the flowery, poetic prose. Shannon's more into that. Maybe she's enjoying this. But I'm interested in the historical information, and I think that's what's most important here, is that we're getting a cultural context for Jesus' life, which will help us to understand why he does the things he does, and maybe why he says what he says the way he says it. Okay, on to chapter 2.